Welcome to Intelligent Think, in which we explore what makes ideas great, how we can make our thinking better, and why it's so important to share your ideas with the world. Plus, we talk to thought leaders and authors about their own ideas and experiences so you can mine them for gold nuggets that will help you on your own journey. I'm Verity Craft.
I'm Christina Wedgwood.
And this is Intelligent Think. Hey, C.
Hi.
I feel like we've done very little prep for today's episode, but we thought we might talk about what makes an idea good and how you know whether an idea has legs, whether it's for a book or for maybe it's some kind of other offering. For us, we're obviously always thinking about it from a book perspective. And I feel like it's a question that we don't really have an answer for. So it'll be a really interesting conversation.
We'll have a robust debate instead.
So what comes to mind when I say what makes an idea good?
Oh,
You're hating me for starting you off on that.
You didn't even dump me in it. I knew that, but I didn't think I was going to have to just start from nowhere. I thought I was going to spitball. What makes an idea good?
See, I think we talk a lot about better thinking. So our purpose is to bring better thinking into the world because we know that, all the problems that the world is facing will not be solved with some of the current thinking that's out there. So we need people to think a bit differently. And so sometimes I feel as though asking what makes an idea good is kind of a bit silly because there's not really these are good ideas and these are bad ideas. It's more like, what are the criteria that you're using to judge it by and what's the purpose of it? Because an idea that's good in one situation is going to be absolutely horrific in another situation.
You're right, totally context dependent. But I think when we are thinking about what's a good idea, it's an idea that drives us forward, like an idea that delivers progress or an idea that makes things better somehow. That's what I think a good idea is. But they are context and situation dependent. Nothing's a blanket good idea, is it?
No, I don't think so. And something that's a good idea for a book will need different criteria than maybe something that's a good idea for even another kind of content. Something that makes a really great book might not necessarily make a really great keynote, for example, or something that makes a really great blog might not actually be enough of an idea for a book.
Yeah, I think that an idea is good if it can be in long and short form formats though. So if you can't boil it down to a blog post or a LinkedIn post or similar, then you probably haven't got clear enough on the main point that you're trying to make. And then if you couldn't write a full blog about it or an ebook or a series of articles or something, then you haven't got the depth of understanding of what you're trying to do yet. Than if you're just bleating little short posts about it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I saw a post, Nina Field, who works in kind of strategic thinking, posted on LinkedIn the other day sharing about a book that she'd read, which basically said that a really great expert doesn't have necessarily more knowledge. What they're really good at is organizing that knowledge so that it can be used, or maybe it was a really good teacher, but they're really good at taking all of the stuff that's in their head, everything they've learned over time or gained through experience, and organizing it in a way that can be really useful for people. And I think when it comes to thought leadership and when it comes to books, that's the big difference between whether an idea is good or not. You might have something that in theory sounds really great, but if you can't put it into a form, whether that's a framework or a model or just saying it in a really easy to understand way that other people can do something with, it's maybe not a great idea. So I think when it comes to a great idea, there's a great idea in and of itself, which, someone says something and you go, oh, that's a cool idea. Maybe you should do something with that. But I think it only becomes a useful or valuable idea maybe when it is able to be turned into something that can be implemented by other people or that can be used to change the way something is done. I think just an idea in and of itself, and we talk about this a bit with why you've got to share ideas, because just an idea in your head great,
limited utility,
limited value. And it's actually only when you put it into a framework, a model, words that can actually help somebody else understand it, then it becomes a great idea.
And probably take action on it too. I think one of the other aspects is that a good idea has some proof, or it becomes a better idea when you are able to prove it or meld it with, you haven't just had a theory about something, you've meshed it with some experience or seen the merit or the validity of what you're saying because you've seen it play out. You've tried it and you've seen it play out. So I think that's how an idea gets better. It doesn't necessarily mean, I think you can just imagine a good idea to start with, but a robust idea has to have that other stuff built in.
You mean you don't just want influencer platitudes on Instagram? What? Crazy.
There's some experience.
So if an idea can be good kind of regardless, it comes to you, it can be good, but it's really only valuable, say, if it's of utility to people. How do we know if an idea is good for a book? How would you help people figure that out if you're having a conversation with like somebody who's come to us and said, I've got this idea that I'm not sure about?
I usually judge it more based on how the person that is talking to me about it is than the idea itself, if that makes sense. So I think I'm thinking, I've never thought of this before until you've asked the question like that, but I think I'm thinking, do I think this person has the potential to do something book-related, bookish, with this idea, as opposed to, I that's the marriage you need. You need the author who feels strongly enough about it and clearly knows some stuff and has worked with the idea, tried it out, used it in, say, the delivery of what they do, and they feel strongly about it with the idea itself. Like the objective idea couldn't just be anybody's. It has to be theirs. And so I think when I'm talking to someone, I'm looking at, is there enough behind the way they're telling me about this that I think they could go the distance with it for a book?
That's such a good point, because you just have to look at how many thousands of leadership books are out there, for example, and yet there are certain authors, there are certain thought leaders who just are more successful with their books because of the way that they are framing it. So if you think of someone like a Simon Sinek, Start With Why, whatever you think of him, the reason that he is so successful is because he's taken, what is a pretty crowded field, let's say, in terms of your organization, your purpose, how you communicate things, leadership, and he's found kind of things that are quite unique or ways of doing it that aren't necessarily, I'm pretty sure he's not the first person to have said that message, but he's found a really unique way to say it. And because of that, his idea has gotten far more cut through and therefore had a bigger impact on people. Yeah. And so I think you're right. It's the combo of, you can have a really great idea, but if you are not passionate about it, able to communicate it clearly, have found your own unique perspective on it, then it's not going to stand out. It's not going to get cut through. And as a result, it won't have the same impact that you would like it to have. Yeah.
So I think you're living it. If you're living it, you've got a better chance of writing about it too. So it makes me think of the speech competitions there's that assignment you used to do at school, and you were given a topic and you had to go away and write your speech and deliver your speech. And amazing speech writers and deliverers could do that based on any topic, right? And you could say that if someone bought us virtually any topic, we could write a decent book about that, because we know how to research and we know how to structure ideas and we know how to nail down an audience and target to them. But I don't think that anyone would, you wouldn't go on the journey of writing a book about an idea, any old idea, or an idea that you'd borrowed or taken from someone else. I think you've got to have some ownership of it.
There's something really special about books where the person who has written it is so ridiculously passionate about their idea,
yes.
right?
Yes.
There is something really special when you read a book or watch somebody on stage or whatever it is, but when you read a book and you go, this is this person's life's work, they care about this so much, whether it's because they've experienced it personally, whether it's because it's, the work that they do with clients, whatever it is. There is a tangible difference when you read something created by someone who really gives a shit. And I think that that's what makes it really special. You're right. They could have a really similar idea to somebody else, but because of their unique perspective on it and their unique take and their passion, that comes through and it becomes a better book and better thought leadership because of it.
And I think the best ideas and the best performing books, I've talked about this before, but they evolve. So the book that someone's written about it isn't the last word on that idea, usually from them. And I use the example in my book about Greg McKeown and essentialism that followed, effortless that followed essentialism. He's found the flaws in his original idea and then improved on those in the second book. But I've just started reading Oliver Burkeman's Meditations for Mortals, and he's taken the ideas, which honestly are they're simple, but he's made them quite complex, I think, in 4,000 Weeks. Like I love him and love his writing, but that was not my favorite one of his books. And I found it hard to get through. I just admitted to you I finished it almost a year after I started it. I found it hard to get through. I thought it was maybe a bit repetitive. He was remaking the same points again, and I didn't think necessarily adding enough to that. But then this new one, Meditations for Mortals, has come out, and it's a more practical guide. So the idea is, and he's quite funny in his introduction because he says, I can't tell you how to read it, and there's no perfect way, and all of that stuff that aligns with his ideas more generally. But he's done it as I think there's 28 chapters, and the idea is that you're meant to read one of them each day, and some of it will stick, like the bits that stick with you, that's what you'll integrate into your life. He's not introducing new ideas, is I think my point, from what's in 4,000 Weeks. He's merely just he's evolved on them, but he's having another go at giving them to us in a more accessible way.
That's really interesting, which is it would probably feel quite crazy to people that you would evolve your thinking through books, given how much effort they are.
And slow.
And they're slow. But I think that's just an example of what you can do through everything, right? As your ideas should evolve and they should get better. And I've said this so many times, and somebody mentioned it again the other day, that if you are not embarrassed by what you put out there 5 years ago, then probably you haven't learned enough or you haven't evolved enough.
Yeah. Or you waited much too long to share in the first place.
Yes.
That's the other aspect is
100%.
You were honing way and perfecting way too much before you ever let it go.
Yeah. 100%. So I guess some of the other things that I would be looking at when you're trying to decide whether an idea is good enough for a book are things like, what are you actually trying to achieve with it? Because a book is a really big effort to do. And I think unless you're clear on this is the impact that I want it to have. So for example, for somebody with a business, it might be, I want to sell more of this specific offering. So therefore your book, you don't want your book to be totally irrelevant to it. One of the challenges that we've had with your book is that you wrote it before we decided to focus on books. Yeah. And although you mention in it about us writing books and, about all of the things that we do, we've gotten a lot more niche, and yet your book is, more generally about thought leadership and helping reluctant thought leaders. And so one of our challenges is that it hasn't been a clear pathway through to what we now want to sell. So I think that if you can get really clear on what you're trying to sell within your business and your idea for your book feeds into that, it doesn't have to be the same thing. In fact, it's probably better if it's not exactly the same thing. But if it feeds into that, then that way you know, well, yes, you know, you have to be really passionate about the idea, and yes, you have to be really excited about the idea. But also, if you're going to put in that effort, you should also make sure that it's going to get you the return that you want. So I think that that's a really important piece for deciding what your book should be about as well. A lot of people come and say, oh, I thought about writing my story, my memoir. And like, I think that's an awesome thing to do. But if you're going to do it properly and get a book coach, get editors, get, you know, a publisher, do all of that stuff, unless you have a massive audience who's already excited for your story in particular, I think it pays to find what's the angle that you can still weave your story through, but what's the angle that is going to help you sell more of what you want to sell. It's going to help other people take their lessons from it rather than it just being an interesting read.
It's very hard to get a commercial return on something that doesn't kind of close the loop to services somehow, because we know that they're not going to make enough money on book sales alone. There has to be other ways to leverage it. And so I think those sort of memoir-based projects are great, but to me, I see them happening downstream for people. Like, you've got to be in a very different position by the time that is what you do it because you love it and it's an offering to the world and it's, you know, part of your legacy or whatever, not because it's a smart business move necessarily.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. Which I think also helps if you think about your book from the perspective of your audience too. Like, why is somebody going to pick up and read this? Why would they want to read it? Well, you know, yeah, some people are just going to be interested in your story, and the more well-known you are, the more likely that is to happen. It's why memoirs of famous people are so successful, and why, you know, so many books are ghostwritten, because lots of famous people can't write their books.
But we still want to read their thoughts.
But we still want to read their thoughts and their stories. But for most thought leaders who don't necessarily have those massive followings, they need to be considering, who is my audience for this? Who am I trying to impact? And it can sometimes be the case that the person who's buying from them is the same person who's going to read the book, but not always. And so I think being really, really clear about who is this book for and how do I want it to commercially help my business is incredibly important, because if you just do one of those, like if you just think about the commercials and how is it going to sell my book, it's probably not going to have that much of an impact on the people who are reading it. And if you just think about the impact on the people that are reading it, it might be great for them, but it probably won't help you get ROI. So I think both of them are really important.
So, and how do you think we best bring those together to validate whether an idea is good and should be a book?
Great question.
Putting you back in the hot seat.
I think, do you know what's interesting? So we were doing the first part of a book planning workshop with a new client the other day, and this is actually a question that we were talking about. So he is, you know, he works with largely general managers of kind of retail or hospo businesses, basically. So those who are managing like branches or multiple branches and have lots of people to manage. And he goes in and helps them with like communication among their team and managing the team. And so we were trying to figure out who is the target reader versus who's the target buyer for his business. And in his case, we worked out that the reader is the individual kind of manager in the branch. So it might be like the team leader or someone who's kind of the, you know, working on the floor but managing people, because they're the ones who are trying to communicate lots. But the buyer of the book is probably the general manager, or the division manager or the area manager, whatever they're called.
Do you mean the buyer of the book or the buyer of the...
Both. So they're still going to buy the book and then give it to the people that need to read it, because he
and they would be the ones that would hire him to work and like to come and consult or whatever it is he does, coach.
Yes. So actually the buyer of the book and his offerings are the same person, but the reader might be different. And he equated it to when he used to be in that situation, when he was working in that situation, they would have like a bookshelf of books that had like Who Ate My Cheese and I can't remember what the other ones he mentioned, but that they would have specific books that they would get every new manager to read, basically.
Right, yeah.
And so that's where he sees his sitting, but like with a really specific focus. So that was an interesting example where you can see how there's a clear reader that maybe is different to the buyer, but you can see the pathway for it to get to the reader, if that makes sense. So I don't think that it's that there's one right way or one wrong way. Your buyer and your reader might be the same person, but it's working out, why would somebody buy this? You know, what's in it for them, what's in it for you, and then also, and who is going to read it, and how do you want them to kind of transform or change or learn over that journey?
Okay, good answer. Now, I was like, imagining that we were going to pause there, so I've got no extra thoughts whatsoever. I love it. We were going to just like let the background thing finish happening, and now he's vanished again.
So one of the things that I think is really important as well when it comes to making ideas great is that very rarely is an idea perfect when it comes out of your head. Like we talked about it in our first episode. We talk about it all the time, is how important thinking partners are to making your ideas better. And, you know, you generally the first thing that comes out of your mouth, whether it's in a brainstorming session or when you're on stage or you're just talking to a friend, is not necessarily fully thought through because it's just popped into your head and you throw it out.
It's often the seed of an idea too. And when you've said it, could be not always, but could be the first time you're thinking it through properly.
Yes.
I do that a lot.
I do that a lot as well. I just say it a lot more confidently so people think that I know what I'm talking about. But so one thing that I wondered is, how can you test out your ideas on other people? Like, what are some of the ways that we suggest people test out their ideas to check if there's some validity to them, to check if there's some value?
I feel like I did that checking ideas. I think I do it live all the time in delivery with clients. And even this morning, we were talking about a few different posts or pieces of content. And, you know, the client in question had a sort of a theme or a start of an idea, and it was definitely not fully formed. And she said, so I'm just going to talk around that for a minute. And she did, and I wrote some notes down. And then she said, but what do you think? And so then I was like, oh, well, it sparked these couple of things for me. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. So she didn't even know necessarily when she started talking. She wanted to talk about generosity and how generosity is, you know, worthwhile in your leadership practice, and how you might think about bringing that in, and just how grateful we feel when someone's given us generosity of time but anyway, she didn't really know where she was going at all until she started talking. And I think just absorbing that for somebody and then going, okay, so you sort of mean this, or how does that relate to this? Or I can either ask a probing question, or I think I reframe it in my words, what I've just heard her say. And that gives, when someone hears it said back to them, they've got a chance to go, oh yes, but, or no, course correct here, that sort of thing. Or they see what they've missed in their original sort of thinking about the idea. So that's kind of the way I think I act as a thinking partner for people. What do you reckon?
I was just laughing because as soon as you said like the reflecting back and, oh yeah, that is what I was trying to say, it made me think of the fact that when we're at restaurants, I will say to Matt or to one of my friends, I'll go, I'm tossing up between this and this. What do I want? And so they know that they're meant to tell me what they think I want. Right. And then I will either go, nope, I don't want that. Or, oh, yeah, that is what I want.
Yeah. You'll have a reaction, right? You know, when someone says it to you, you know, but when it's coming out, you don't necessarily. So, yeah, I think she could see if you go bristly at one of the bits or one of the meal suggestions in that case, you're like, okay, well, that told me where I do want to go, actually.
Yes, exactly. But no, I hear what you're saying. Basically, when you are trying to make an idea better, you need somebody who is going to reflect it back to you, and they might add new things to it, they might not, but just in hearing how somebody else has absorbed it, how they have understood it, you'll be able to see where the areas are that maybe it hasn't been very clear for them, or it hasn't been obvious how they can improve it, or how they can take it and use it, I mean. So it's really, really important that you're not just sitting like head down, never talking to anyone, whether you're writing a book or whatever it is. You are actually thinking about, how am I getting this reflected? And it might be through coaches or thinking partners. It might just be through sales meetings. I do it in sales meetings all the time. I'll kind of use phrases that we've been playing around with around our positioning, or I might mention something that we're thinking of developing, and just seeing how they react to it is really valuable, even if I haven't really worked out exactly what we're doing for it.
You might not know the how, but the seed of an idea is there.
Yes, exactly. And just getting that feedback is really important. So on all of this, I think testing feedback out, our first episode was about thinking partners, and I had somebody message me after they listened to it. Unfortunately, after we had already recorded our mindset episode, because it would have fit really nicely in there. But one of the things she said came to mind was around fear kind of holding us back from having a thinking partner. Like, basically, what if my idea sucks? What if I'm wrong? What if the feedback is what I don't want to hear? And she was wondering how much kind of the inner critic gets in the way of being open to a thinking partner, or what other barriers might be in place. Because I think that relates into how you make your ideas better. We're saying if you want to make your ideas better, you need a thinking partner. But what if the fear of getting that feedback, or the fear that your ideas are so bad that that person might think that you're an idiot? What if that gets in the way? How do we overcome that?
I think you need trust with a thinking partner would be a major. And, you know, we've talked before about how we create this sort of safe space for challenge. So I'm quite careful with how I elevate or add to someone's idea. So it's always a yes and, not a no but, or even when you're doing a what about, or you're trying to play devil's advocate, you can still say, well, yes, well, assuming that that's all true, so I think they help. A good thinking partner shouldn't like stoke any of those fears. But then I'm not sure how do you know that the person that you're trying to take this to is going to be a good thinking partner?
Maybe you test them out on things that aren't as important to you first. Like, not in a testing kind of, oh, I'm going to make you do a test way, but just in a, throw something at them that you're not that attached to first, or
see what they do with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an important piece of it is, how somebody reacts when you first bring something to them can be indicative of how they'll be if you bring something bigger to them, for example.
Yeah,
so
true.
I think if you take an idea to somebody and they shut it down immediately, even if it's just a little one, that's probably a sign that they're not open and willing to have a discussion. Whereas if you take something to someone and go, I've been playing around with this, what do you think? With no real pressure, and they go, oh, interesting. What about? And they start to ask questions, but not in a, oh, that's shit. Then they're probably going to be a better thinking partner. And obviously, you can, if it's from a professional capacity, like if it's a coach, book coach, any kind of coach, then talk to the people that they've worked with, because then you'll get a better idea of how they approach it. We've worked with coaches who I sometimes quite like working with someone who's quite tough and just kind of says it exactly as it is and doesn't really try and couch their words in any way, because to be perfectly honest, that would be my natural inclination be that way. It's why I wasn't a very pleasant teenager to be around. But as an adult, I've learned how to do things more kindly. Whereas I know that then you've found those people a lot more off-putting and not felt safe with them.
Pushy or a bit confronting. So I think maybe naturally got a much more gentle style, and therefore I'm drawn to people who will not compliment sandwich me or anything, but, you know, that are there to build you up as well. So I take quite seriously that role when I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think you've got to find a thinking partner who fits you and your personality, because if you are somebody who really struggles with your inner critic, if you're somebody who really doubts themselves, then probably somebody who's like a ball buster, just going to tell you exactly what they don't like about things, is not going to be right for you. Whereas if you're somebody who is a bit more like me and just kind of wants to get shit sorted, then you might want somebody who is like brutally honest, even to the point where it hurts.
Fair. Well, and at least you know when you've got that person's approval or respect, or you have won them over to an idea, they're not pandering. Like, you know, with someone like that, oh yeah, I actually I must have nailed that, or I've made that good enough or robust enough now, because they'd tell me if it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
You know where you stand.
Exactly. Something that came up in our Intelligent Think Tank community last week was somebody shared a custom GPT, so chat GPT, around like figuring out your perfect offer, which seemed to largely be based off Alex Hormozy's models, which I've been reading his books recently. So I was like, that looks familiar.
Okay.
So right or wrong, whether it should have been used to create a custom GPT by somebody else. But what I thought was really interesting was somebody since used it. And then this morning he mentioned how helpful it was to kind of have almost an AI thinking partner. And I've heard that from quite a lot of people, that they're almost using AI as a thinking partner. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to explore. Do we see value in that? Do we see issues in that? Like, where do you sit in terms of AI as kind of a thinking partner or something that can help you improve your ideas?
I don't know about, I've got to say, I'm going to answer this question from a slightly naive standpoint, because I'm not an active AI user. And I don't want to say I'm not an AI user at all, because it's baked into all sorts of things now, but I don't go and open a chat GPT kind of tab ever to use. And I feel like a bit of a noob, because I actually don't really know how to, or understand. I wouldn't know how to talk to it. But I guess I'm interested in what people think about whether it has coaching skills or not. I think already I can see that actually, if we're thinking just about that reflecting back part of what we maybe there's value in that, but if it's only going to give you back your words anyway, I'd be curious as to whether it can show you any of your blind spots or anything when it's reflecting back what it's understanding that you've said or input.
I suppose it depends what you're asking it, right? Like if you're asking it to, if you're putting something in because you want it to reflect back what you're saying so that you can just get an understanding of how somebody else would take it, then you'd ask it to do that. But you can also ask it to act like a coach and to ask questions around where are the blind spots and what haven't I considered. Or you can ask it to be like, you can put in your audience persona and then ask it to act as that person, and so get it to ask questions. So I think it's a real challenge for coaches in general, to be honest, including us, including book coaches, because while I don't know that it's necessarily quite there yet, I suspect it will be pretty soon in terms of being able to act as a thinking partner. And I do know people who use it to improve what they're doing. Now, we always put the proviso on, like, if you want to be a thought leader, your ideas need to come from you. Your perspective needs to be unique. You should not be using AI to go, hey, I need a book about X topic and it generates the content, or I need a blog about X topic and it generates the content. Put in what you want it to say, and then you can use it to, you know, make it better or improve things or whatever. So that's just kind of our blanket proviso. And actually, we are going to soon do another episode of this where we're going to test out letting you guys in on one of our team discussions, which will be around AI, because it started coming up in a team meeting and was so like we just immediately all had different opinions and there wasn't really one right answer. And we thought, actually, this could be a good podcast episode. So that's coming. But in the meantime, I think it's a real challenge because, like, as a person, I want to say, well, I would rather talk to another person and I would rather get a person's opinion. But I can also see why it's a massive benefit to people to have something that's free or very low cost if they're paying for it, the paid version, to just get them at least over the starting line.
And accessible whenever they want it to be, like on tap when they want it to be. And also, I don't know, I wonder if you feel less, if your inner critic might be a bit less shouty if you were talking to your computer as opposed to another human. But I think when I think about myself sitting in the thinking partner sort of seat, wearing that hat, I'm getting a lot of info from what people aren't saying, or the gaps in between, or the way that they're saying certain things. Like I prod where I see people light up, or where there's a red flag that you can see so many nonverbal things, or tone changes, body language changes, pace that they're speaking changes, the way they look off into the corner of their screen, whatever it is, that show their uncertainty in certain areas as well. And so you can push more there. I wonder if you could gloss over those things with an AI.
That's a really good point, I think. And that's where the human is still needed. And what I love is you could almost you could use AI for a thinking partner for some things. Like, here, I've written something. Where would you what isn't clear, or what would make it better, or, things like that. Or, as your initial thinking partner to just get started. But lots of people aren't great writers, so they're not always going to communicate themselves best through a brief. Or I suppose you could add a voice recording or something, but they're not going to find that the easiest. And B, you get so much information from the non-verbal or the pieces that aren't words and how you communicate, that actually, you're right, that's where a human thinking partner has massive value still, is because they can see, like, oh, you slightly winced on that word, or like
it's the way that you're saying it, not just hearing what you're saying. And I think that's the powerful people piece that I just can't see it doing. But absolutely, like, bring it in as a sense check. I just don't think it can be the whole solution yet.
Yeah, maybe it's like a piece of the puzzle. It's one of the tools. I often try to describe AI as that way. It's a tool. It's not the be all and end all. And it's a tool that can be used really effectively in some cases. But you still want the human in things. Like, we often talk about the fact that we don't enjoy reading content that's clearly written by AI. And I'm sure that will continue to get better. And, the people who brief it better get better content and all that. But when we see something that we're like, that's AI written, I don't want to read it.
No.
And it's the same thing with kind of thinking and having a thinking partner, as I'm like, I still want that human. I want to see somebody's face light up when I tell them something.
There's a dynamic. Is it dynamism? Is that a word?
I think so.
There's a dynamic energy to spitballing with someone and bouncing off each other, and the energy kind of that you've got around a thought or an idea intensifies and stuff. You can't recreate that, I don't think, if you're getting like stuff spat back at you on screen. It's not the same sort of increasing feed off each other happy spiral that comes from it.
I think that's even the difference, if we think of like one person versus two people, that's even the difference between like somebody doing a straight to camera video versus a talking to somebody. The energy is really different. They both have uses and both are really good in different ways, but they're just not the same. And same with like podcasts that are one person talking. I never enjoy as much as when it's a conversation because the energy that comes out of the two people talking or more people talking is what makes it fun. And so I think it's recognizing that your AI is one type of thinking partner and can be really useful in certain situations, but that you still will get massive value from people. I feel like we've gone back to thinking partners again instead of whether your idea has legs. But I suppose to kind of close up the idea around how we make things better and how we get feedback on stuff, a couple of other things that I find really valuable if I've come up with an idea. One is obviously I put it in front of you guys because usually I've come up with an idea, think it's brilliant, and then you're like, okay, let's just unpack that here, Verity. So definitely thinking partners. But the other one is to basically break it down and try and sell it before I do anything with it. And that's not necessarily like for us, that's often because I've come up with an idea that I actually want to sell something. So I try and make a sale or get someone to buy into it. But it could be getting somebody to click on a certain article about an idea, or, you know, it could be getting somebody to agree to watch a presentation that you've done. Like, what's the buy-in that you can get from somebody?
Enroll them somehow.
Yeah, how can you enroll them first to see if there's actually interest before you put hours and hours and weeks and months and however long into creating something, whether that is your book or whether that is, you know, just some other piece of content or some offering in your business. How can you make sure that somebody wants to buy it before you actually put the time and effort into creating it?
It's like a resonance check. And I think I used that heaps when I was thinking about and then starting to write my book, because and I have the benefit of having lots and lots of conversations with lots and lots of people, because I still obviously play a business development and a networking and stuff role for the business. So it was largely prospects that I was testing the ideas out on. And I know I've mentioned this before, but lots of people were, you know, I'd say about this idea of a reluctant thought leader, and they'd just sort of, they'd nod or they'd smile to themselves. And I was like, yeah, no, I know that that's resonating with people, which both gives you fuel to keep going with it, but it also, I think, starts to give you the inkling that I'm onto something here that others will look for. And many of the people that pre-ordered the book first were those people. Whether we hadn't delivered services for some of them in the interim. They weren't clients. They were people I'd had conversations with, you know, a year prior. They were first in line when it came out because they had connected with the idea before it was even, and they wanted to see where it had got to. So I think that early enrollment is quite important.
Oh, God, yeah. And I think that's the case whether it's a book or an offering in your business or anything really. So one of the things that I think people find really hard is deciding whether an idea is good for a book. So for those of you who are listening, we have created something to help. So if you are interested, I'll put the link in the show notes. We have a checklist that's called the book topic test, and it takes you through a lot of the things that we've chatted about today, like, you know, who is your audience? Are you clear on them? Have you already sold them something around this idea? Are you really excited and motivated by this idea? Is it something you want to dedicate time to? And a bunch of other questions that it's not that there's one right answer or wrong answer. You know, you don't have to tick every single one of them in order to know that a book is good. But if there's, you know, if you're starting to tick quite a few of them, then it becomes clear that, okay, there's probably something here, and then we can have a chat, or you can, you know, just dive in. But I think it's really important that before you dive into writing, you think about those things so that you can get really clear on, is this the right idea for my book and my business? So if you want that, it's called the book topic test. It'll be in the show notes. And yeah, let us know what you think, and if you find it useful and manage to come up with a good topic for your book.
Nice. Cool.
So any other last thoughts on what makes ideas great?
I think it's interesting. When you were talking about the book topic test, Ben, I was thinking about a someone in our network who has had an idea that she's been working on for a number of years. She's built a product, a technology product, and she's now considering a book. And the book is specifically, I think an idea is very multifaceted. So there's different aspects that you can tackle. And she specifically wants to write her sort of why story, almost like the manifesto type bit. And there's a reason she feels that that's missing from the sort of sales process or creating demand for this tool that she's created. But she's not, the idea is much bigger than what her book will be. So I think it's also okay to know that you're going to take, even though a book is a really big piece of work, you're only going to take you may still take a small fraction of a much bigger idea around, in her case, changing the world of work for people and the way that they feel about the work that they're doing and finding the right fit in the work that they're doing. And she could write an instructional manual. She could write something that shares all the logic and rules and models or frameworks or whatever that are built into this piece of technology that she's created. But actually, she's going the bigger picture of, in a way, her book is the piece that's going to get enrollment. So yeah, I don't really know what the point was there, but I just thought your idea it's not just one thing. You can still tackle it or come at it from a book point of view in many, many different ways. And for her, it's because she knows what impact she wants it to have in the overall scheme of things. She's not trying to convince people that the product's a good one or anything like that. It's not a straight sales book, but it is here's the big problem, much bigger, broader, wider problem that I've had an idea to solve. And I think that's a way of broadening out what you're working with as well.
And I think some of those are the most impactful books because I know you don't like the word impactful.
So I was going to let it slide.
But the books that have the biggest impact are usually those that really highlight a problem and then they bring forward a solution. Some of the most successful books just highlight a problem. Like we have to think of something like Stolen Focus or books like that frankly are a little bit depressing, but you still read them because you're like, I knew there was something wrong. Like I knew that something wasn't right. So I think the more that's a really good point is the more that you can tap into the why, into the what is the problem, whether that is on a big societal level like Stolen Focus or whether that's on a really tiny, individual level, this is the problem that you are facing. The more that you can tap into what is that problem that somebody's facing, the more likely it is that the idea that you have, the solution that you have, is actually going to help them solve that problem.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. You've been listening to Intelligent Think with Verity Craft and Christina Wedgwood, brought to you by Intelligent Inc. Thanks to Lochana Media for video production, Jeff Ong for our theme music, and to you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and here is to better thinking together.